billionaire's world shatters when doctors declare his twins will never walk. But just when hope seems lost, he catches their nanny doing something unbelievable in the dead of night. What he uncovers will test his faith, rip open old wounds, and reveal a secret so powerful, it could either save his children or destroy everything he loves. This is not just a story. It's a piece of someone's hidden pain quietly waiting to be heard. In today's story, we dive into a moment that can change everything, in the most unexpected way. Before we begin, where are you listening from? Canada? The US? Norway? Let us know in the comments, because stories may begin anywhere, but they connect us all. Stay with us until the very end, because sometimes, what breaks your heart can also heal it. And if you believe stories can change lives, hit subscribe, join our journey. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment, your voice matters here. The Harrington estate, perched atop the misty cliffs of Newport, was a palace that rarely knew silence. Usually, its grand halls echoed with the chatter of staff, the hurried footsteps of maids, the purr of expensive cars rolling up the driveway. But tonight silence reigned. It was the kind of silence that carried weight, thick, suffocating, and oddly sorrowful. Inside the east wing, the glow of a soft lamp spilled across two identical cribs. In them lay Michael Harrington's twins, Leela and Lucas, his only children, his only family. They were almost 3 years old now, their eyes wide and bright like their late mother's, but there was one thing that haunted him more than his sleepless nights: they couldn't walk. Doctors had examined them countless times, running tests that bled him to more tests. No physical deformity, no nerve damage, no illness they could identify. The medical reports came back inconclusive every time. It was as though something invisible bound their tiny legs, holding them back from a world waiting just outside their nursery doors. Michael, a man who had built his fortune from nothing, a billionaire whose name echoed in boardrooms and magazines, found himself powerless here. His empire, his wealth, his relentless drive, all useless when faced with the sight of his children crawling across polished marble floors while other toddlers ran, stumbled, and laughed in grassy fields. The staff whispered behind closed doors. Some called it a curse. Others believed the children's grief, having never known their mother, was manifesting in ways medicine could not explain. And though Michael dismissed superstition, he couldn't deny that the air inside the mansion had felt heavy ever since his wife, Evelyn, had died during childbirth. And then came the nanny. Her name was Clara, a soft-spoken woman with auburn hair and eyes that seemed to hold secrets no one could quite name. She arrived at the estate when the children turned 2, recommended by a family friend whose word Michael trusted implicitly. Clara never raised her voice, never hurried, never faltered. She moved through the mansion like she belonged there, though her past was wrapped in shadows. Michael watched her often, not because he distrusted her, but because he found something strange in her presence. When she entered the twins' room, they would stop crying instantly. When she sang, the children's faces lit up in a way he had never seen before. And sometimes, just sometimes, he swore he saw Leela try to push herself onto her feet when Clara held her hand, only to collapse again as soon as Michael walked in. It unsettled him. One late evening, after another fruitless doctor's visit, Michael stood at the window of his study, staring at the moonlit gardens. That was when he heard it. A sound. Soft. Almost like singing, but not quite. It was coming from the children's wing. He moved silently, his polished shoes whispering against the carpeted floors. The closer he got, the more he realized it wasn't ordinary singing. It was something melodic, haunting, threaded with a language he didn't recognize. When he reached the nursery door, he froze. Through the crack, he saw Clara kneeling beside the twins. Her hands hovered inches above their tiny legs, glowing faintly in the dim light. The twins were laughing, not crawling, not sitting, but standing, wobbling on their feet as though gravity had suddenly decided to show mercy. Michael's breath caught in his throat. The billionaire who believed in nothing but hard work and reason now stood in front of something he could neither explain nor deny. His heart thundered as 1,000 questions collided in his mind. Who was this nanny really? What was she doing to his children? And why, in that terrifying, miraculous moment, did it feel like she was the only one who could set them free? He pushed the door open, and what he saw would change his life forever. Michael Harrington sat at the head of the long mahogany dining table, untouched food laid out before him like an offering he could not accept. Crystal glasses caught the chandelier's light, silverware gleamed, and yet he felt as though he were dining in a mausoleum. Across from him, 2 high chairs stood side by side, the twins babbling happily over their mashed carrots. Leela's curls framed her round cheeks, and Lucas tapped his spoon against the tray with mischievous delight. They laughed together, twin voices blending like a melody that should have brought him comfort. Instead, Michael's chest tightened. He saw what wasn't there, the absent sound of tiny feet running across the marble floors, the giggle of toddlers chasing one another, the chaos that should have filled this grand house. Instead, the mansion was too orderly, too still. The twins crawled everywhere, their knees bruised from cold tiles, their palms perpetually dirty from dragging themselves along the floor. It broke him. Michael was a man known for strength, discipline, and vision. At 38, he was one of the wealthiest men in the country, lauded in business magazines as the relentless builder. Reporters adored his rags, to riches story, a boy from a crumbling neighborhood who clawed his way into the world of steel, real estate, and finance until he owned half the skyline of New York. But none of those victories mattered when he looked at his children and realized he couldn't give them the one thing every parent longed to see: the freedom of their first steps. He had spared no expense. The world's top pediatric neurologists had walked through his doors, armed with their clipboards and machines, only to shake their heads in polite defeat. Therapists had tried to coax the twins into standing, bribing them with toys and sweets, but the moment the children attempted, their legs buckled as though the strength had been stolen away. The staff whispered when they thought Michael couldn't hear. The children are cursed. Their mother's death left a shadow over them. Perhaps the house itself is too heavy with grief. Michael dismissed superstition, but even he couldn't ignore the way the mansion sometimes felt like a tome. Evelyn's laughter no longer echoed through the halls, her piano sat untouched, and her portrait, hanging above the fireplace, was a daily reminder of what he had lost the night his children were born. He carried that guilt like a chain. He blamed himself for Evelyn's death, for the hollow look in her eyes as she whispered goodbye. Every time he looked at the twins, he saw both his greatest love and his deepest failure. That night, as the twins dozed off in Clara's arms after dinner, Michael lingered in the doorway, watching. The way Clara held them was different. Not mechanical, not obligatory. Her eyes softened, her body seemed to glow with warmth. It unsettled him how easily they trusted her. How when they cried, she could soothe them with just a hum, when his presence only made them wail louder. For the first time, Michael admitted to himself what he had refused to voice aloud: he was losing his place in their hearts. And maybe, just maybe, Clara was holding onto a secret that explained everything. He turned away from the nursery, his fists clenched, a storm brewing inside him. He had built empires, silenced rivals, crushed enemies. But here in his own home, with his own children, he was powerless. That's when he swore he would find out who Clara really was and what she was doing to his children, even if the truth shattered him. The morning sun slipped through the tall curtains of the Harrington estate, draping golden lines across the marble floor. The mansion had a peculiar rhythm at dawn, the gardeners whispering to each other outside, the cooks clattering in the kitchen, and the faint hum of Clara's voice drifting from the nursery. Michael paused halfway up the grand staircase, listening. That sound again, her voice. It wasn't an ordinary lullaby. It was softer, stranger, almost like a chant woven into a melody. The twins, who usually wailed in protest during breakfast, were giggling instead. He climbed the last step quietly, his polished shoes muted by the thick carpet. Pushing the nursery door open a crack, he saw her. Clara sat on the floor between the twins, her auburn hair falling over her shoulders like a veil. Leela leaned into her, clutching at the soft fabric of her dress, while Lucas clapped along to the rhythm she created by tapping the wooden floor with her palms. The children's eyes sparkled as though Clara had handed them the sun itself. But it wasn't just her presence that unsettled him. It was her smile. Clara's smile was not the polite curve of lips a caretaker might wear. It was knowing, almost secretive, as if she understood something about the children that he did not. It infuriated him. He was their father, yet she seemed to hold the missing piece of their world. When Clara noticed him in the doorway, she rose gracefully, brushing her dress free of wrinkles. "Good morning, Mr. Harrington," she said, her tone calm, unhurried, as though she hadn't been caught in an intimacy that belonged to him alone. "Morning," he replied, his voice clipped. His gaze flicked toward the twins. "You have a way with them." Her smile deepened, subtle, unreadable. Children respond to love more than discipline, sometimes more than logic. The words stung, though she hadn't said them cruelly. Logic was his armor, the thing that had built his empire and kept him from collapsing after Evelyn's death. To hear it dismissed so easily ignited something restless inside him. At breakfast, Michael sat opposite the children, his eyes constantly darting toward Clara. He watched the way she coaxed the twins into eating, how she spoke to them in a low, soothing tone. At one point she whispered something in Leela's ear. The little girl giggled, her spoon slipping from her fingers. For the briefest second, Michael thought he saw her push against the table with her tiny feet, almost rising. But when his eyes widened, she dropped back down and looked away. The moment haunted him. Later, when Clara took the twins for their nap, Michael called his head of staff. "Run a background check on her," he ordered. His voice was low, dangerous. "I want everything. Where she's from, who she's worked for, what schools, what references. Leave no stone unturned." "Yes, sir," the staff member replied, bowing slightly before disappearing down the corridor. Michael walked into his study, pouring himself a glass of scotch even though it was barely noon. The amber liquid burned his throat, but not nearly enough to quiet the storm inside. He had trusted Clara because a close friend had vouched for her. But now, with each passing day, he was certain Clara wasn't just a nanny. She was something more. Something hidden. That afternoon, he found himself standing at the nursery door again. Clara was sitting by the window, sunlight draped over her, humming softly while the twins napped. Her eyes were closed, her head tilted slightly upward, as though listening to something only she could hear. And then he saw it. Her hand hovering just above Lucas's leg, her fingers trembling slightly, as though she were channeling something invisible into him. Michael's heart raced. He took a step forward, but Clara's eyes opened, meeting his directly. Her lips curved into that same secret smile. That night, sleep eluded Michael. The storm outside rattled the windows, rain streaking against the glass like fingers scratching to be let in. He sat in his study, the firelight flickering across his face, while Clara's secret smile replayed in his mind like a haunting refrain. He had seen her hand hover over Lucas's legs. He hadn't imagined it. The faint tremor in her fingers, the stillness of her face as if she were concentrating on something beyond the realm of ordinary life. What unsettled him most was not what she had done, but the way she had looked at him afterward, calm, unafraid, almost daring him to ask questions. By midnight, the report he had ordered arrived in a slim envelope placed neatly on his desk. Michael tore it open, his pulse hammering. Clara Whitmore, age 29, born in a small village in Northern Ireland. Parents deceased, attended a modest boarding school, then worked as a nanny for several wealthy families in Europe before moving to the States. Clean record, polished references, too polished. The paper told him nothing, and that nothing was more damning than a scandalous past. Life always left scars, secrets, mistakes, but Clara's file was spotless, as if someone had carefully rewritten her history. Michael set the papers down, frustration mounting. He poured another glass of scotch, but before it touched his lips, a sound cut through the storm. A whisper, faint, barely audible, but unmistakable. It wasn't the rain, nor the wind. It came from the east wing, from the nursery. Heart pounding, he set his glass aside and strode down the corridor, his bare feet silent against the Persian rug. The closer he came, the clearer the sound became. Clara's voice. He reached the door and pressed his ear against it. Her words weren't English. They weren't any language he recognized. They rose and fell in a strange rhythm, fluid, melodic, almost ancient. His chest tightened. It sounded less like singing this time and more like prayer. Against his better judgment, he pushed the door open a fraction. Inside, the twins lay fast asleep in their cribs, their tiny chests rising and falling peacefully. Clara stood between them, her eyes closed, her arms raised slightly, palms hovering above each child as though in blessing. A faint glow shimmered around her fingertips. Michael's throat went dry. He wanted to storm and demand answers, but something stopped him. A force he couldn't name. For the first time in his life, fear crept into him, not fear of Clara, but of what she represented. Something beyond money, beyond medicine, beyond reason. Suddenly, Clara's voice stopped. Her head turned slowly toward the door, her eyes opening. Michael froze. Had she heard him? Seen him? The room was silent except for the rain outside. Then she spoke, her voice clear, calm, cutting through the dark like a blade. "You shouldn't be here, Mr. Harrington." Michael's heart skipped. He hadn't stepped inside, hadn't made a sound. Yet she knew. For the first time in years, the billionaire who controlled empires found himself on the wrong side of power. Morning came gray and heavy, the storm clouds still hanging low over Newport. Michael barely noticed the weather. Clara's words from the night before clung to him like a shadow. "You shouldn't be here, Mr. Harrington." He sat at the breakfast table, his coffee untouched, his eyes fixed on the twin high chairs across from him. The children were unusually quiet, their eyes sleepy but oddly serene. Clara moved between them with effortless grace, feeding Leela small spoonfuls of oatmeal while Lucas tapped the tray with his fingers, humming softly to himself. Michael's mind replayed the scene from last night over and over. Her arms raised, the shimmer at her fingertips, the strange, melodic words. He had built his life on logic, on facts. But no fact could explain what he had seen. He cleared his throat. "Did you say something to me last night?" Clara looked up, her auburn hair catching the morning light. For a moment, her eyes seemed to sparkle with amusement. "I speak to the children often, Mr. Harrington. They need reassurance before they sleep." Her tone was smooth, practiced, and yet Michael knew she was dodging. He wanted to press, to demand the truth. But then it happened. Leela shifted in her chair, not with the usual restless squirming, but with a push, a deliberate push. Her small feet pressed against the wooden bar of the high chair, and for a fleeting second, she lifted herself upright. Her little body wobbled, unsteady but undeniably standing on her legs. Michael's breath caught. "Lila," he whispered, half rising from his chair. Clara steadied the girl with one hand, her smile soft and secretive. "Easy, darling," she murmured to the child as if the moment wasn't monumental. Leela giggled, her curls bouncing, before collapsing back into the chair. Michael's pulse hammered. He turned sharply toward Clara. What just happened? His voice was sharp, demanding. Clara simply brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. Children develop at their own pace, Mr. Harrington. Sometimes all they need is the right encouragement. For he wasn't convinced. For almost 3 years, the twins hadn't even managed to stand. Doctors said it wasn't possible. Yet Clara had been with them barely a few months, and now this. After breakfast, Michael followed Clara and the children to the garden. He watched from a distance as she spread a blanket on the grass, letting the twins crawl and play beneath the cloudy sky. At one point, Lucas pulled himself upright against Clara's arm. For a breathless moment, Michael saw him balance, his tiny knees trembling, his feet pressing into the earth as though testing it for the first time. Michael's throat tightened. The sight filled him with a strange mix of hope and dread. Hope that his children might finally be free of whatever bound them. Dread that the key to their healing wasn't him, but her. As the children laughed, Clara lifted her gaze and locked eyes with him. That same secret smile touched her lips, a silent acknowledgement that she knew exactly what he had witnessed. And for the first time, Michael wondered, was she saving his children, or binding them in ways he couldn't yet see? The night pressed down heavily on the Harrington estate, the air thick with the scent of rain-soaked earth. Michael sat alone in his study, the fire flickering low, the twins' laughter from earlier still echoing in his head. He had seen it, both of them. First Leela pushing herself upright, then Lucas pressing his weight into the ground with tentative strength. Tiny glimpses, fragile as candle flames, but real. And Clara had been at the center of it all. The neatly typed report on her life lay spread across his desk, its pages mocking him with their emptiness. Too perfect. Too clean. As though she had been written into existence only when she arrived at his door. Michael picked up the phone and dialed an old contact, Richard Kane, a former private investigator who now owed him more favors than he could count. I need you to dig deeper, Michael said, his tone sharp, urgent. The name is Clara Whitmore. I don't care what it costs or how far back you have to go. Find me something, anything, that tells me who she really is. Richard hesitated on the line. You think she's dangerous? Michael glanced at the closed nursery door down the hall, the faint hum of Clara's voice drifting through the quiet like a lullaby. He swallowed hard. I don't know. That's what terrifies me. For days, Michael observed Clara with sharpened eyes. She moved through the house as though she belonged there, calm, unshaken, her presence steadying the children in ways he never could. When the twins cried at night, Clara reached them before he did. When they struggled, she was there to lift them. And always, that smile lingered, soft but unshakable, as if she carried a truth he wasn't allowed to know. By the third day, Richard called back. His voice was low, uneasy. I found something. A year ago, Clara worked for a family in London. They had a daughter 7 years old. Records say the girl was wheelchair-bound. No medical treatment helped. Then Clara arrived. Within months, the girl was walking, running even. The family cut ties suddenly afterward, moved to France. No explanation. Michael's grip on the phone tightened. And Clara, she disappeared for almost 6 months. No records. No employment. It's as if she vanished. Michael felt his chest tighten. His children weren't the first. Clara had done this before. But was she a miracle or a danger? That evening, unable to contain himself, he confronted her in the hallway. Clara, he said, blocking her path as she carried folded linens. Tell me the truth. What did you do for the Whitmores in London? Her eyes flickered. Just for a second. But it was enough. She recovered quickly, her voice calm, measured. I've cared for many families, Mr. Harrington. Children sometimes need love more than medicine. That's all. But Michael saw it. The shadow in her gaze, the carefully hidden crack in her perfect facade. As she brushed past him, her shoulder grazing his, she whispered so softly he almost thought he imagined it. Be careful what you're looking for. Some truths change everything? Michael stood frozen in the dim hallway, her words echoing in his mind. And in that moment, he realized something chilling. Clara wasn't afraid of him at all. The first sound that morning wasn't the rustle of staff moving about the estate, or the faint rumble of the ocean against the cliffs. It was laughter, bright, unrestrained, and startlingly new. Michael jolted upright and bet his heart pounding. For nearly 3 years his twins had laughed, yes, but never like this. Never with such fullness, such freedom, as though joy had suddenly discovered a new depth inside them. He threw on his robe and followed the sound down the hall. The nursery door was ajar. He stopped in the doorway, stunned by the sight before him. The twins weren't crawling on the carpet as usual. They were on their feet, wobbly, unsteady, clinging to one another for balance, but unmistakably standing. Leela's tiny hand gripped Lucas's, and together they swayed like saplings in the wind, their eyes wide with both fear and exhilaration. Clara knelt a few feet away, her arms outstretched. That's it, my darlings, she whispered, her voice calm yet shimmering with encouragement. One step, just one. And then it happened. Lucas shuffled forward, one tiny foot dragging, then another. He stumbled, but Leela tightened her grip, and somehow together, they managed 2 steps before collapsing into Clara's waiting arms. Their laughter filled the room, high and pure, echoing off the walls like music Michael had never heard. He stood frozen, his throat tight, tears stinging the corners of his eyes. For years, doctors had told him to prepare for the possibility that his children would never walk. And yet here they were, on trembling legs, reaching for something the world had denied them. But his awe was tangled with fear. His eyes flicked to Clara. She didn't look surprised. She didn't even look triumphant. Instead, her lips curved into that same knowing smile, as if she had expected this all along. When she finally noticed him standing there, Clara simply said, "They're ready now." Michael's voice broke. How? How is this possible? She stroked Leela's curls gently, her gaze never leaving the children. Some things don't need answers, Mr. Harrington. Sometimes love opens doors that medicine cannot. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to let himself fall into the miracle, to let gratitude replace suspicion. But the image of her whispering strange words in the dark, her fingers glowing faintly above their legs, was burned into his memory. That evening, the mansion was alive with a sound it hadn't known in years. The twins chased each other, still shaky, still stumbling, but upright. Their laughter rang through the halls, so full and wild that even the staff paused to listen, smiling in disbelief. For a moment, the house felt alive again, almost as if Evelyn's spirit had returned to watch her children take their first steps. Michael stood in the corner silent, his heart torn in two. Joy at seeing his children free. Fear at knowing it had come from Clara, not him. He should have been the one to give them this gift. Instead, he felt like a spectator in his own children's lives. As the twins tumbled into Clara's arms again, Michael's chest tightened with a thought he could no longer ignore. If Clara could give his children back their legs, what else was she capable of taking? The Harrington estate had not known such loveliness in years. The sound of little feet pattering against the marble floors echoed through the grand halls, mixed with squeals of delight and bubbling laughter. For the staff, it was nothing short of a miracle. For Michael, it was both salvation and torment. He watched from the landing as Clara guided the twins down the staircase, her hands hovering just close enough to catch them if they fell. Their steps were unsteady but determined, their faces alight with wonder at this newfound freedom. The housemaids exchanged glances, some smiling with tears in their eyes. "They're walking?" One whispered, "Truly walking," and Michael's chest swelled with pride, and then twisted with something darker. Because every time the twins reached a new milestone, their eyes sought Clara's approval, not his. When they stumbled, it was Clara they reached for. When they succeeded, it was Clara's arms they ran into. And he, their father, was left standing at the edges of their joy. That afternoon, he tried to reclaim a moment. In the garden, he crouched beside them, his hands open. "Come to me," he urged softly. "Daddy's here." The twins hesitated. For a brief second, hope surged in his chest, until they turned toward Clara instead. She gave a small nod, and only then did they take a step in Michael's direction. But even as they reached him, their eyes darted back to Clara, as though waiting for her silent approval. The realization cut deep. His children were learning to walk, but away from him. That evening, Michael retreated to his study, drowning his bitterness in the amber burn of scotch. Richard's words from the phone call replayed in his head, the girl in London wheelchair, bound walking within months. Clara's name was attached to too many miracles to be coincidence. But miracles had a price. He pressed his palms into his eyes, forcing himself to think logically. If Clara was truly helping the children, shouldn't he be grateful? Shouldn't he fall to his knees and thank her? And yet gratitude curdled into dread. Because Clara didn't behave like a simple nanny. She carried herself with quiet authority, as though she were guarding a secret larger than any medical truth. When he entered the nursery later, he found her humming softly while brushing Leela's hair. The twins sat at her feet, drowsy and content. The sight should have warmed him. Instead, it unsettled him more than ever. "You're replacing me," Michael said quietly, almost to himself. Clara looked up, her auburn hair glinting in the lamplight. For a moment, her expression softened with something that almost looked like pity. "No one can replace a father, Mr. Harrington," she said gently. "But sometimes children go where they feel safest." The words lodged like glass in his chest. Safe, his wealth, his power, his sacrifices. None of it made his children feel safe with him. They had chosen her. That night, lying awake in the silence of his vast bedroom, Michael admitted a truth he had fought to deny. Clara wasn't just a nanny. She was the center of his children's world now, and if he didn't uncover the truth about her soon, he might lose them forever. Not to illness, not to fate, but to the woman who had stolen their hearts. And perhaps their very souls. The Harrington mansion was vast, a labyrinth of hallways and chambers built over generations. Yet Michael knew every corner. Or so he believed. That evening, as the children slept and the staff retired, he wandered restlessly, his mind a storm of doubts. Clara's words echoed in him still. Sometimes children go where they feel safest. The thought gnawed at him. He had always been their protector. Their father. How could someone who had arrived less than a year ago become the anchor of their little world? Unless she had brought with her something more than comfort? Something hidden. Michael's steps carried him down the east wing, past the nursery. The corridor was unusually quiet, the air heavier than the rest of the house. His hand brushed along the paneled wall absently, until it caught on something strange. A seam. He frowned, pressing harder. A faint click echoed in the silence, and a section of the wall shifted inward. Michael's breath caught. A door. It swung open reluctantly, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling downward. Dust rose in the air, tickling his throat. For a moment he hesitated. He had lived in this house for years and never once known of a hidden passage. Who else could have discovered it but Clara? His hand tightened around the brass railing as he descended. The air grew cooler, denser, almost damp. When he reached the bottom, he found himself in a small stone chamber, dimly lit by a single candle burning on a wooden table. And there, scattered across the table, lay objects that sent a shiver down his spine. A worn leather book filled with handwritten symbols he couldn't read. Drawings of children, their faces eerily similar to Lila and Lucas, with marks traced over their legs. Small vials of dried herbs, their labels in a language unfamiliar to him. And at the very center, a framed photograph of Evelyn, his late wife. Michael staggered back, his chest tightening. Evelyn's picture. How had Clara found this? Why was it here, hidden beneath his home? The candle flickered, casting shadows that seemed to dance across the walls. He reached for the book, flipping through its pages, each filled with strange diagrams of hands hovering over bodies, notes scribbled in looping script. It was no Nanny's diary. It was something older. Something ritualistic. Looking for answers, Mr. Harrington. The voice froze him where he stood. He turned sharply. Clara stood in the doorway, her figure framed by the dim light from the staircase. Her auburn hair glowed faintly in the candlelight, her eyes unreadable, calm as ever. Michael's voice was rough, almost breaking. What is this? What are you doing in my house? With my children? Clara stepped forward, her hand brushing the book closed with deliberate care. You asked for a miracle, she said softly. You just didn't know it. Michael's pulse thundered. This isn't a miracle, it's madness. Tell me the truth. Clara. Who are you? She tilted her head, that secret smile curving her lips once more. I am exactly who your children need me to be. The silence between them thickened, heavy as the stone walls around them. Michael's hand hovered over the strange book, as if its leather cover might burn him. Clara, unshaken, watched him like someone who already knew how this conversation would end. You've been hiding things from me, Michael said, his voice hoarse, cracking under the weight of disbelief. Herbs, symbols, Evelyn's photograph. What is all this, Clara? What have you been doing to my children? Clara's expression softened at the mention of Evelyn's name. She stepped closer, lowering her voice until it was almost a whisper. Not to them, Michael. For them. Michael's jaw clenched. That sounds like the same lie you've been feeding me since the day you walked into this house. Do you take me for a fool? Clara didn't flinch. Instead, she placed her hand gently on the book, as if shielding it from his anger. You want the truth? Then listen. Your children were never meant to walk. Their legs were healthy, yes, but their spirits. She paused, searching his eyes. Their spirits were bound. Michael's blood ran cold. Bound. The word echoed in the chamber like a curse. What are you talking about? He demanded. Clara drew in a slow breath as though bracing herself. Evelyn knew. Long before her accident, she came to me when she was pregnant, desperate and afraid. There were complications. Not with her body, but with the children's souls. Old things, ancient things. You wouldn't believe even if I told you. She begged me to protect them, and I swore I would. Michael staggered back as though struck. Evelyn, his Evelyn, had gone to Clara. But Clara had only arrived less than a year ago. The timeline didn't make sense. His head spun. You're lying, he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Evelyn never kept secrets from me. She would have told me. Clara's eyes glistened, but her smile remained steady, almost pitying. She kept this one because she loved you. Because she knew you'd never accept it. She carried the burden alone until the day she left this world. And I. She pressed a hand to her chest, trembling now. I am the only one who can finish what she started. Unless you'd rather watch your children remain in chains you cannot see. The room spun with her words. Michael wanted to dismiss them, to call her insane, a fraud. But the image of Leela clutching Clara's hand, of Lucas whispering her name in his sleep, clawed at his certainty. They did trust her. They did grow calmer, lighter, in her presence. He stared at the book again. The symbols seemed to blur under his gaze, tugging at some primal part of him he didn't understand. And what exactly do you want from me? He asked at last, his voice barely audible. Clara's reply came with disarming simplicity. Trust. Nothing more, nothing less. But know this. Trust always comes at a cost. Michael's heart thudded painfully in his chest. For the first time in years, the billionaire who thought he had everything realized he might lose the only thing that truly mattered, his children. Michael stood at the edge of the nursery that had become both sanctuary and prison. The twins lay in their beds, their small chests rising and falling in restless sleep. Clara stood between them, the strange book cradled in her hands, a halo of lamplight casting long shadows across her face. "This is the last night," she whispered, her voice trembling. "If we succeed, they will be free. If we fail, the price will be heavier than you can bear." Michael swallowed hard, his mind still warring with itself. Everything about this felt wrong. Rituals, whispers of binding spirits, a nanny who claimed to know his late wife's deepest secret. And yet, as he looked at Lucas and Leela, he saw something in their stillness that terrified him: resignation. Children weren't meant to look that way, as though already wary of life. "Tell me what I have to do," he said finally, his voice breaking. Clara's eyes flickered with relief. She opened the book, pages worn and ink faded, revealing symbols that seemed to shimmer in the lamplight. She placed it gently on the floor between the twins' beds, forming a circle of salt around it with practiced care. "Hold their hands," she instructed softly. "No matter what happens, do not let go. They need your strength to anchor them." Michael sat down, grasping Lucas's tiny hand in one and Lila's in the other. Their fingers curled weakly around his, like fading embers waiting for fire. Clara knelt and began to chant, her voice low and melodic, words older than time itself. The air thickened, heavy with an energy Michael could feel pressing against his skin. The lamps flickered, shadows lengthened, and for the first time, Michael swore he heard Evelyn's laughter echo faintly in the room. His chest tightened. Was it grief memory, or something more? Suddenly the twins stirred. Lucas whimpered, Leela's lips parted, and their small bodies began to tremble. Michael tightened his grip. "I'm here, my loves," he whispered, his tears falling onto their hands. "Daddy's here. Don't be afraid." Clara's chant grew louder, urgent, pulling the invisible chains from their small souls. Then, in one final cry, she slammed the book shut. The circle of salt burst outward in a flash of light, for the room went still. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then Lucas coughed. Leela gasped. Slowly, as if discovering their bodies anew, the twins swung their legs over the edge of the bed. "Daddy," Leela's voice was weak, but her eyes were bright. "Can I stand?" Michael's breath caught. He nodded, unable to speak. Holding onto the bed frame, she pushed herself up. Wobbly, trembling, but standing. Lucas followed, his little legs shaky, yet determined. Michael fell to his knees, covering his mouth as sobs tore from him. For the first time in years, he saw his children not just alive, but free. Clara closed her eyes, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. "Evelyn kept her promise," she whispered. "And so did I." Michael looked up at her, torn between gratitude and dread. "What price was paid for this?" he asked. Clara's gaze lingered on the twins, then met his. "One day, you'll understand. For now, love them. That's all they need." But in the depth of her eyes, Michael saw a shadow that told him the story was far from over.
A billionaire's perfect life collapses when doctors say his twins will never walk again. Desperate and broken, he hires a mysterious nanny, only to discover her doing something unexplainable in the dead of night. What begins as suspicion soon unravels into a journey of faith, sacrifice, and an unbelievable miracle. This isn't just a story of wealth, it's a story of love, hope, and the lengths a father will go to save his children.